So I think the benefits of a lot of the things I talk about in these videos are internal, right? They're for us and they're for us to reflect and think about. But there's obviously an external component when dealing with other people, when dealing with groups, individuals, etc. In whatever setting that might be. Might be professional, might be personal, might be some sort of social gathering, family, friends, whatever. One of the concepts that I think is really important when dealing externally, and it does apply internally as well, but I'll focus it externally, is that we need to create an environment that allows for, that incentivizes, that nurtures, that encourages truth, that encourages objective truth and questioning and viewing from different perspectives and trying to ensure that we are in good faith working towards the objective that we believe we are working towards, right? So simply put, again, create an environment that encourages truth to come out. And I probably see this break bad most obviously in professional settings. I spoke yesterday about a situation where I was asked to work on a Sunday, and how I was trying to process that and kind of some of the conflicted feelings of I don't want to work on a Sunday. I feel like that's personal time, but I understand I might have to, and all these things. And as I started to dig into that a little bit, what I started to recognize was more of my frustration for me personally was not necessarily that I had to work on a Sunday, because if it's an hour on a Sunday and it's kind of a one-off thing in isolation, it's I don't have anything major going on. It's really not that big of a deal. What I think is at the root of what bothered me about it more is that for me personally, the threshold or the rationale that needs to be passed or achieved to warrant working on a Sunday, I wasn't sure that hit. And there wasn't an environment that allowed for that truth to come out. There wasn't an environment that allowed for that questioning to come out. And that's important, right? It's so often overlooked. And again, I'll stick in the professional setting. In the organization I work in and the projects that I'm working on, there's some pretty senior people involved above me in it. And much like we talk about in all settings, we are flawed. Our minds are flawed, and flawed seems like an offensive word or insulting word, and I get that. But in this nature, it's just matter of fact. We are all flawed in some ways. We all have issues that we are trying to deal with, biases, ways in which our minds function. And for highly successful people that are typically in leadership positions at organizations, they are in a unique position with that, because the confidence they have in their own abilities, somewhat justifiably and somewhat rightfully so, is pretty high. So when they come to decisions, when they decide on approaches or methods or ways in which they want to handle something, they often don't create that environment for truth, to encourage truth, because they feel like they've got it, right? History has told them they have a good sense of this. They have confidence in their own thoughts, and when they set a path and a plan and decide the timeline is such that we need to do this work on a Sunday, they don't question it too much. They feel pretty good about it. They go more to their gut instinct because it's served them well historically, and they may be right. And that's the thing about truth, right? And creating this environment that encourages truth. That's what that's the mental math of it that should help overcome that. Is that if you're right, checking your work may slow you down slightly, but the benefit you get from making sure that you're right, because none of us are perfect. The benefit you get of catching those times where you may break bad and it may drive inefficiency and at worst doesn't allow you to meet your objective. At best, it takes you longer, right? It's less efficient how to get there. Creating that environment that encourages truth is the check for that. You shouldn't be afraid of it. So if you make some decision at work and you create an environment that encourages truth, and people beneath you, peers of yours, whatever it might be, feel comfortable to speak up and ask the questions, right? And it's important that those questions, because I could see somebody saying, well, if everybody's questioning everything, and I get that, right? That could be inefficient. But if the questions are thoughtful, if they're logical, if they're in good faith, well-intentioned, those are questions you should never deny, right? Those are questions you should welcome. You should encourage, you should celebrate, you should reward, because if those questions come, that's what it's going to do. It's going to help you check your work. It's going to help you look at it from a different angle and make sure that you're working towards the logical, rational path towards your objective, that you're understanding the full reality and the different perspectives of it, and you're moving towards that. And the only way you can do that is by creating that environment. And too often the environment is created that is the exact opposite. An environment is created where somebody makes a decision, somebody sets a path, somebody says something, and nobody feels like they can question it. They feel like there's no point to it, they're not going to listen, they feel like they might be punished in some way, they might be viewed negatively. There's so many things done, sometimes subtly, sometimes not intentionally, it's not malicious. Oftentimes, the people don't even realize, they assume they have an environment where people will speak up. They can't recognize the fact that they won't, right? Or that they feel like it's not safe for them to do so. So, as we've talked about other things, it creates like this feedback loop where they feel even more confident because I've created an environment where people could speak up and they're not. So, must be all good. It's definitely all good. You have to check that. You have to make sure you've created that environment, right? And some of the questions we've talked about in the past come in here. What would it look like? How would it look different if I created an environment where they didn't feel comfortable to speak up, where I wasn't encouraging the truth? What would that look like? And then look at the current environment that you've created and see, what can you point at? What are the tangible things that are different? Do you actually ask people? Do you press people to give you feedback? Do you go to them directly afterwards? When people do it, how do you respond to it? Do you act on it or do you dismiss it, right? Do you take the time to actually listen? What's the forums you provide them to do that? Do you reward it at year end when you're talking about reviews and how people performed? Is that something that you highlight? All these things tell you how it would look different. And if the answers start to come back that it doesn't look that different, again, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that you're not doing it. It means you can't be sure and you need to check further. So such an important concept when you're dealing externally, when you're dealing with other people, and your goal is to get to a better place or whatever objective you're trying to achieve. The truth is not your enemy in that. It may feel like it sometimes internally, but the truth is your friend in that, because the truth is the truth whether we admit it or not. So you need to create that environment that encourages the truth to come out.